Afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our final session of GradPrep 2025. In this session, we're going to talk about finding community, and I'm going to turn it over to Caden. Caden, the floor is yours.
Hi everyone. My name's Caden Benzinger. I'm a writing coach here at the GSSC, and let's get right into this. First of all, welcome to Boise State. On behalf of Boise State and the Graduate College, we welcome you. And as part of our commitment to your success, Graduate Student Success Center has put together this presentation to help you feel prepared entering this next phase of life. Who am I? I'm Caden Benzinger. I kind of mentioned that earlier. I'm a master's in counseling student here at Boise State. I'm also a writing coach here at the GSSC. And I want to use my experience as a graduate student to help incoming students navigate the transition into graduate school as seamlessly as possible. So, in my time as a graduate student, and I'm entering my third year, whenever I mention that I am a graduate student, I get these four questions most often. What is graduate school like? How do I manage the stress of graduate school? How do you manage your time between work, school, and your personal life? And what advice do you have for incoming graduate students? So today, I thought that we could kind of look into these questions and how we can maybe find some community, create a self-care plan, and these kind of things. So let's go top right in. So, what is graduate school like from my perspective? As a counseling major, I understand that it is a little different than a lot of other programs, but some general things that will pretty well transition over to any program are a narrower focus on academic content. In undergraduate, it felt like you were just kind of given a whole bunch of ideas and you kind of had to pick which ones were kind of your niche or your interest. Whereas in grad school, you've already kind of picked that niche and interest and you're really just diving into that rabbit hole. An emphasis on collaboration. There's a lot more teamwork and working with other students, other programs to kind of better your learning and your research and work. And that kind of goes hand in hand with that self-driven learning. One of my professors said this great quote, which kind of describes graduate school. We help you light the fire and you take that fire where it is needed. So it's that idea of, they help ignite this passion into what you're studying, what you're researching, and you go take that passion to where it's needed, whether it's here in Idaho, in Boise, other states, other countries. And curiosity is another big one too. There's, at least in the counseling realm, there's never a black or white yes or no. There's always a lot of gray area and kind of keeping that curiosity and kind of working through those answers. I don't really have questions that don't have clear answers, I should say. Individual growth. You're going to grow a lot as a graduate student. Um, I've had tremendous growth in even just my 2 full years of graduate school. I'm also relatively young. I just turned 25, so that also could be that kind of coming of adult age type of thing. But I've noticed a lot of growth in myself as a person. Um, an application of learning. It's a lot more of instead of just learning these ideas, taking a test, you're applying that learning to this next stage of learning. So maybe you took some, biology class, and then you take that higher up biology class, and you're taking a lot of those ideas and concepts into that. And that's what graduate school is really like. And then the professor-student relationship. This was a really big difference for me. The fact that an undergraduate, you're in a lecture hall of 200 people, and it's really hard to kind of get that one-on-one time with your professors. And in graduate school, it's a lot smaller courses, and there's a lot more of a, mentor relationship in that. And I understand counseling isn't the, most cookie board, cutting board type of thing that will translate to every other program and major. So I asked one of my buddies who was studying more of the biochemistry PhD realm. And so I kind of asked him some differences that would maybe vary from the master's level of work. And he kind of told me to some things such as navigating successes and failures in research. He described it to me as, he had this ideal game plan coming in that he was gonna, all of his research was gonna go great, and he wasn't gonna have to redo anything, make any changes, and that turned out to be almost the opposite of what happened. Research is gonna fail. There's gonna be ups and downs in that. So it's being able to navigate those ups and downs. He also described more of self-motivated learning, which I kind of discussed a little bit in the other slide and making connections with other fields of study to enhance your research. He's really studying that biochem stuff really well, but maybe he needs some kind of engineering perspective on how to develop this, tool that he can use. So it's a lot of collaboration with other majors. He also described varying workloads, especially with research deadlines. So, you're already going to have your coursework and you're going to be working on this overall project of your dissertation. And there's going to be some kind of, high points in that where you're going to be grinding a lot. And there's going to be some other times where maybe there's some lulls in that work. So just being able to navigate those ups and downs of your workload is really important. And he also described the necessity of setting boundaries for yourself, because especially in those heavy times, it can be really overwhelming and feel like you have to get everything done. And maybe there are deadlines where you have to get those things done. But I've noticed with myself and other students that when you're in that kind of heightened state of awareness where I need to get this done, this done, this done, maybe throw in some things in that list that maybe aren't necessarily as important that need to be done like that. So it's really important to be able to take some breaks and engage in some self-care for yourself. One of the things he did for himself for setting a boundary was not checking his school or work email after 7 o'clock at night. And that was a way for him to kind of give himself those last couple hours of his day to do whatever he needed for himself. On to the next question, how to manage the stress of graduate school. And I'd be lying if I told you grad school is not stressful. And it's going to get stressful at times, and you're not the only one feeling that way. And I'm going to tell you that right now. Even if people seem like they're put together and killing it, they're feeling just as stressed as you are. And then I kind of identified 4 ways you can kind of help manage the stress of grad school. And the first of those is going to be community. So creating a community in your program is going to be really important, because in your program, there's a community of peers and professors. And, creating that community is imperative for success in graduate school. Let's say you have 30 people in your program. Each one of those 30 people has a unique perspective on life, the content, everything. So it's really nice to have other people in your community that you can kind of bounce ideas off, explain their understanding of something, or maybe even lend a hand if you understand a concept and they're not getting it. And another really big difference I noticed in graduate school is professors want you to graduate. It's not like undergrad where, they have 100 students in this one class, and if you pass, it's cool. If not, they don't really care. Here in graduate school, they really want you to succeed. And in that, there's going to be a lot of, positive feedback, like, hey, you're killing it type of thing. But on the other hand of that, there's also probably going to be some harsh conversations like, hey, we need to fix X, Y, and Z, and kind of, kick you into shape, so to say. So please ask questions if you're confused or if you want to learn more. Your professors are going to love that, and it's going to enhance your learning as well. Okay. And then a community outside of grad school. This is just as, if not more important to the community outside of your classroom. Having friends and family to discuss things like not related to school is super important. If you're just going school, work all day, it can be really tiring, and you kind of lose touch with all the things that make your life great, calling and seeing your family and friends, just having those little trivial conversations about life and the weather and what's new with them. One thing I really want to emphasize is really take the time to call or see them. I know we live in this digital world where, texting is really easy, and maybe there's some logistical things where it's kind of hard to set up a time to call or even see them. Maybe they're in a different city, state, country, but really take the time to try to call them if you have that available to you. Even FaceTime is a great way. There's just something about that face-to-face connection that really just fulfills you as a human versus just, reading text messages, which can still feel nice, but having that time to call them is really important. And they could also be a great piece of encouragement for you as well. There's going to be times where, you're not feeling great about yourself and your work, but having something to, encourage you and be like, you got this, can be really powerful. And Boise State is proud to offer a wide range of services to help build your community. There's counseling at the health services. There's writing and formatting coaches here at the GSSC, like myself, Haley, and Bryn. There's GradWell student events. There's a whole lot of events that they host. I kind of mentioned this in our last GradPrep presentation, but there's things like art socials. There's just general socials where you can go meet other students. They've held cooking classes. And there's even outside of Boise State, there are many clubs, gatherings, and events to help you build your community. These are things like, clubs or maybe some intramural sports, communities around, maybe in a Facebook group of people who like to meet up and play Dungeons and Dragons or something like that. There's a lot of different events, clubs, and gatherings all around Boise that can help you build that community for yourself. And then another way you can kind of manage the stress is self-care. And self-care is this individualized way we take care of ourselves and make sure our needs are met. Some things that's fulfilling to me might not be fulfilling to you. For example, I really like basketball. That's a really great way for me to unwind and take some stress off. But you might not like basketball, let alone sports, and you're more of a reader. And that's great. Make a list of those things that bring you happiness and keep those close to you throughout your time in grad school. Because there's going to be times where you are so stressed you can't even think about, what would make you happy or what things you could do to bring care to your life. And if you're able to have this list that you can look at, like, oh, that would sound great right now. I'd love to, dive into a really good book and go take that time to do that. And there's many different models of wellness related to self-care. And today I'm going to discuss two a little bit further. The first of which is the dimensions of wellness. This is created by SAMHSA to help individuals actively cultivate wellness into their lives. A great quote I saw was, "Wellness incorporates many dimensions of health, each of which is interconnected within an individual's total well-being." So this idea that all of these dimensions of wellness all work together to create this wholeness of wellness, if that makes sense. And so there's this little activity we can do. So we have these dimensions here, but this activity is you're going to draw something similar to this circle on the left side of your screen. And you can Google the UC Davis Dimensions of Wellness, and this will have information and resources for each dimension. And you basically label each section of this circle with one of the dimensions. On the inner part of that circle, you rate where you're at on that dimension now. So, maybe on environmental, you're a 6. And you could list reasons why you're a 6. Maybe you go outside once a week, for an hour or two, but you'd like to, be better about that. So in that upper half of that circle, or section of that circle, I should say, you can rate where you'd want to be and kind of list some activities you can do that could help you reach that higher level of wellness in that category. And one thing to kind of preface when doing this assignment is there's going to be some dimensions that it's pretty hard to do as a college student. You're not going to have a perfect 10 out of 10 financial wellness as a college student. So giving yourself some grace in that and being realistic in your ratings and where you're at could be really helpful. I'll give it a minute so you guys want to take a picture of this slide and do this later. The recording will be posted as well, so you can kind of follow along with that later if you would like. On to this next slide here. And then the Healthy Mind Platter. We talked about this quite a bit in our last presentation, so I don't want to deep dive into it too much. But it was created by Dr. Dan Siegel and they postulate that having these 7 dimensions or 7, facets of the Healthy Mind Platter, if you can do all of these in any given day, it's going to support optimal brain health. And like I said, we already kind of talked about this in depth in the last presentation, so I don't want to go too far into it. But there are 2 sections that I really want to emphasize because I think they're arguably the most important of these 2. And that first of which is going to be downtime. Downtime is that time your brain is just simply allowed to wander. And this is time where there's no processing of information. This is, something as simple as just staring at a wall, to looking out the window. You're just kind of there existing, letting your mind daydream and wander. It gives time for your brain to just rest. Without this rest, your brain just doesn't function properly. I heard this great quote talking about downtime, and it compared your brain to a sponge. It can only soak up so much information before it's saturated and can't really hold anything anymore. And sometimes you got to let that sponge dry out so it can absorb more information. I think we've all been there in class where, you've just had your 3rd back-to-back class. Your brain's already full. You can't really retain anything new. And they're just throwing new information at you, and it can feel really overwhelming. So taking that time, especially in grad school, to just wander, let your brain reset. It can be really powerful. Some great ideas to participate in some downtime are taking a walk with no music, just walking around and noticing your environment, being really mindful in that. Mindfulness and meditation can also be a great tool for you. And even just something as simple as staring out a window or at the wall for a few minutes, just letting your brain wander and seeing where that takes you. One thing to note is things like watching TV, talking with friends are not downtime. You're actively processing information in that time, and your brain's not really wandering. It's more of just kind of, absorbing information as you would if you were watching a lecture. Maybe not as intense, but it's still processing that info. And sleep. Sleep is something as students that, it can be really difficult to get just the proper amount of sleep for yourself with everything you're doing, work, family, school. There's just so many things going on in your life, but it's so incredibly important for your learning. Studies from the NIH found that sleep is essential for learning, which I think we all knew, but proper sleep before learning prepares your brain to encode new information, and proper sleep after learning helps cement that knowledge into your brain. So it's really important to not only have good sleep going into your lectures or your learning, but it's important to get good sleep afterwards. I think Dr. Robert Stickgold here, a Harvard sleep scientist, said this best when he said, realize that the sleep you get the night after you study is at least as important as the sleep you get the night before you study. So really making sure that you're keeping a consistent sleep schedule is really important for you. And sleep deprivation, I think we've all been there. It can have some really, bad implications for learning, mental health, your physical health, and just life in general. Studies looking at sleep deprivation found that otherwise healthy people who lacked sleep had increased anxiety and distress, and these effects are exacerbated even more for those with mental health concerns. So it's really important to make sure if your sleep is well, so your mental health can be well, so you can go kill it at whatever you're studying. Another great quote I found was, after several nights of losing sleep, even just an hour or two per night, your ability to function suffers as if you haven't slept in a day or two. And I think this is a really important point. I think a lot of people have this idea that, oh, I only slept 5 hours last night, so I'm going to sleep, 10 tonight to make up for it. And although that might have some rebound effect, it can really, add up if you're not being able to create a consistent sleep schedule throughout any given time period. So really make sure you find a routine and a sleep schedule that work for you, because a lack of sleep can reduce learning capacity by 40%. And we definitely want to have as much percent of learning capacity as we can entering grad school. So instead of just telling you all the bad things about sleep and the lack of sleep, let's give you some tools to improve your sleep health. Tips to improve sleep hygiene from Harvard Health. So Harvard Health posted these to help kind of create a better sleep hygiene routine for you. Things like creating a sleep-friendly environment, soft lights, quiet atmosphere, and a comfortable bed. Avoid using substances like alcohol to induce sleep, because drugs like alcohol or sleeping medications, they disrupt that REM sleep, which leaves you more tired the next day. So it's really just this idea of trying to induce this natural sleep if you can. And avoiding stimulants like caffeine after lunchtime. I know with students, coffee, energy drinks are the things that kind of fuel us through our day at times, but having them too late in the day can really disrupt our sleep, make it harder to sleep, and then you have less sleep because of that. And then that's just kind of a cyclical thing. You need more energy drinks, coffee to stay awake, which, disrupts your sleep that next night, and it just kind of snowballs. Creating a relaxing bedtime routine, putting away your electronic devices, enjoying a light read, just some kind of routine that you can kind of follow every single day to kind of signal to your brain, hey, it's probably time to start winding down here. I know for myself, I like to, brush my teeth and floss, and then kind of lay in bed for a little bit, think about my day, and then that kind of signals to my brain, hey, it's time to go to bed. Another really important tool is avoiding doing schoolwork in your bed or your bedroom if possible. Your brain will associate your bed with work or whatever you may be doing, even just scrolling on your phone, and thus not inducing sleep as effectively. The ultimate goal is to signal to your brain when it's bedtime and that's time to go to sleep. So this idea that you're doing work in your bed, and I do the same thing sometimes. So I'm preaching to the choir here, I can imagine. But it's really important to kind of make sure you make your bed only for sleep and creating a self-care plan. This is incredibly important to managing stress in graduate school. Thinking of activities, people, places, and things that bring you comfort and fulfillment. And try to enjoy things as frequently as you can to help you recharge. One thing that I think could be really helpful, which I know it was for me, is our schedules are really full, and it kind of can be hard to just have this spontaneous fun time. So try scheduling it in your schedule. And you can do that by setting boundaries, such as not checking your email after 7 to kind of create that healthy work-life balance. Um, I know one thing for me that really helps, which I believe I talk about later in this presentation, is just having one day or even half a day of the week where I don't do any schoolwork. It's a day for me to recharge and do what I want and need to do for myself. And those little bits of self-care are going to add up when you're doing them consistently. Burnout, you can't talk about self-care without burnout. It's defined as exhaustion of physical or emotional strength or motivation, usually as a result of prolonged stress or frustration. That sounds awfully a lot like a student, if you ask me. You know, we're going to be going through a lot of physical and emotional, strength, and we're going to need a lot of motivation to kind of push through a lot of these, struggles that we're going to go through. Signs of burnout can include exhaustion, reduced performance, and cynicism about their work/school. And people are going to be lying to you if they say that burnout won't happen to you at some point in your graduate program. But burnout can be managed through a few key strategies: practicing self care, like we talked about, taking some breaks from your sources of stress, participating in hobbies, those healthy work life boundaries, and talking to people in your community. Those are all great ways that you can reduce the burnout that you're feeling. And it's not going to be some magical thing where you go and talk to your friend and boom, your burnout's gone. But creating these things consistently in your schedule and in your life are going to add up over time. So you're not feeling that just sense of dread from feeling so burnout that any self care you do isn't going to be helpful. The goal is to hopefully have minimal levels of burnout. So when you can do some self care, it's making like significant improvements to your feelings. The next question I get most often is, how do you manage time effectively in grad school? And time management is incredibly important for success. You have so many things to balance. You got your school, you maybe have a job or an internship, you're doing research for your dissertation, you have your whole home life, and so many other things can add on to that, make it feel overwhelming. Here are a couple strategies that other students and myself use to kind of balance these different responsibilities. This one was kind of my ideas. These are what I use in my daily life. I create a schedule that kind of utilizes my strengths. I'm a morning person, so I schedule a lot of my working hours then. I'm not really a night owl, so after 6, 7 o'clock, I'm not going to be doing things as productive as I would at 9 or 10 a.m. So making sure I can schedule my work times there really helps me a lot. And giving yourself times for little bits of self-care daily, even if it's something small like drinking your coffee and reading your favorite book for 10 minutes in the morning. It's those little things that can give you gratitude throughout the day and motivation to keep moving on. It may not be possible, but I really do advocate for giving yourself one day with no school or work. It's been a really great and helpful recharge for me, especially after having 6 days of long work and school and internships. That it gives me this time to just really do what I need and want for myself. And then one tool I can't stress enough is in large blocks of studying or working, make sure you take some breaks. I know we've all been there where we've had these giant 6 hour study sessions, and it's really important that you take a break in those sessions, because if you're not taking that break for yourself, you're not really learning by hour 5 or 6. At least that's my experience and some experiences of others that I've heard. So really making sure you take some time to take those breaks is important. And then here are some more generalized tips, again, from Harvard Health. Creating a calendar that could be really helpful for you. You could add reminders for big deadlines. This is where you can put great notes for take self care, using tools that work for you. I'm not a big calendar person, so that tool isn't something that would work for me. I like more of note taking tasks that need to be done. So that's something I would utilize. So finding these tools that work for you is really important. Prioritizing your tasks. When you have, 10 tasks that you need to do in front of you, it can be really overwhelming. Like, where do you even begin? Might be helpful to complete some more simple tasks at first before working on the more complex one. Not only is it just that fulfillment of knocking something off your to-do list, but it could also, inspire you to keep doing more because, hey, that wasn't as bad. So maybe these complex tasks won't be as bad as I'm thinking too. And one tool I can also not stress enough is being realistic about your time and the tasks you need to complete them. If you have this big paper that's due in, they tell you about it and it's due in a month, thinking you can knock it all out in 1 week, it's going to be setting yourself up for some failure. These are some big tasks that you're going to need to complete, and they give you a lot of time for a reason. So being able to split up that work that you need to do for those tasks in a significant amount of time is going to be much more beneficial for you when you're learning and your mental health than trying to complete it all in 1 week. So procrastination, although is a very easy pitfall to fall into, can be your worst enemy in grad school with some of these big projects. And what advice do I have for you personally? Peers are an invaluable resource, so make those connections. I can't stress that enough. I have so many great peers in my program that have helped me through hard times and understanding content, practicing new habits. This is really important as we kind of move from graduate school into our kind of adult working lives, is that we've kept habits that maybe we've had from high school. Maybe, procrastinating that, 2-page English paper from high school was a habit that you kind of kept on through college and undergraduate. And if that's, a tool that's not really working out well for you in graduate school, it might be a great time for you to kind of practice new habits that you can carry into your working life afterwards. Utilizing campus resources is huge. That is something that I need to work on myself more. There's so many great resources on campus to help you succeed. And so utilizing those is going to really help, get you ahead on some of those things and feel like you have that sense of, backup and help behind you. And another thing is not underestimating those big projects. It can be really easy to do, as I mentioned earlier, but those big projects will sneak up on you. And I've heard from so many students that putting them off has been some of the most stressful times of their, student life so far. And one thing I also cannot stress enough is you just need to take a deep breath sometimes. It may feel like that, you don't feel like you're good enough to be in this program and there's so many other people, better than you or more qualified. And you have this kind of imposter syndrome. But you were accepted for a reason. So give yourself that, positive affirmation when things are going rough, remind yourself that you were accepted and for a reason. Your program coordinators, your department saw something in you, even if you can't see it for yourself in those moments.